All right, hey, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be addressing a subject that I get a lot of questions on pretty often, and that's hamons. Hamons, I mean, it's such a deep rabbit hole that we're not going to be able to cover it all in this series. I'll be giving you guys some suggestions as far as where to find more information, actual physical in-person classes that you can take, which I highly recommend. I'm only going to be going over the basics to get you started, to get you interested in hamons, and to kind of open your eyes to, I guess, the level of creativity you can start to have once you start understanding the process more. So we're going to be going over that with using this knife right here. It's just a basic hunting knife. I call it the Woo Hunter or the With You Hunter. I make this hunter or I'm actually making a set of these hunters for a special operations team. I'm super honored to have the opportunity to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and grind this real quick, get some bevels on here, and then after I do that, then we'll go over some of the basics of the hamon, and then we'll get started. All right, so now we're going to go over what a hamon actually is. So a hamon is the visual representation of the metallurgic change in the steel due to differential heat treatment. Now I know that is an absolute mouthful, so I'm just gonna show you. So this is one of the Woo Hunters. This is essentially what we're gonna be turning that knife into that I showed you earlier. That's still, just straight out of the forged state. So you have a visual representation of the metallurgic change. So what do I mean by that? That means that this steel that's darker is softer than the steel below. Now, there's a couple things about that really give your knife an advantage, and that's this softer steel is going to be able to absorb more shock, whereas the harder steel is going to be able to hold its edge. It's edge retention. So durability, edge retention. And that's the reason why the Japanese use this technique. What they would do is they would put clay on the blade or on either tanto, wakizashi, or katana. The katana is where it's most widely known for. It's essentially the squiggly line that you see run down the katana. And what that allowed was for their swords to, like I already stated, have that durability and that edge retention. So it's the best of both worlds, while also offering a way for the sword to be repaired and reheat treated if necessary. So essentially what I mean is, if I hit this blade against another blade, right, and I crack that hard portion of the steel, because the harder steel is, the more brittle it is. So if I hit this against another blade and I crack this steel, it's only going to be able to crack up to where the hamon is. I can then reprofile this knife up to where the crack is, reheat treat it, and in the case of the Japanese, repolish it to being sharp, and then I still have a usable blade. So it really gave the makers flexibility when it came to repairs, as well as it just made the blade overall a better performing blade, because obviously, like I said, you had that durability, that shock absorption with that softer steel, and then you had the edge retention, that sharpness over time with the harder steel below that hamon line. Now, like I said, hamons really... It's such a expansive subject. We're not going to go too far into the history of hamons because it is, there's literally books on it as far as the type of hamons you can do, what they were used for, what schools, Japanese sword schools they came from. It is a super, super rich history, and like I said, extremely expansive, and we just don't have the time. And honestly, I don't think I have the knowledge base to speak intelligently about it, only somewhat. So I don't want to do it a disservice. I can, if you have any more questions after these videos or want to delve into it deeper, I'll probably make a more advanced hamon video series later on different polishing techniques. But as of right now, this is just going to be how we do the Flitz hamon with the knife that I just showed you. All right, so I'm part of a Facebook group called Chasing the Hamon. If you haven't heard of that, I highly recommend joining the group. It's a really great community. It's all about hamon and sharing information. And it's also a really good place for inspiration, just because there's a lot of really good makers on there, to include Greg from GC Knives. So being able to see his work has been a very huge inspiration to me and something to strive for. So one of the reason why I bring that up, though, is one of the questions that I've seen on there a couple times is, do you need clay on your blade prior or during normalization? And the answer is no. I mean, you're trying to refine the grain structure in during the normalization cycles, and the whole purpose of the clay is to retain heat underneath the clay. That's what it's retarding the hardening, what would you say, the hardening curve during the quench. So it's slowing down the cooling where underneath where the clay is. So you don't want it there during the normalization cycle, because the blade isn't going to be heated evenly. It's going to lose heat unevenly as well. It's just not good. So don't. Quick answer after that long ass explanation is, do not have clay during normalization. And I bring that up first because my blade is already normalized. I've done the grinding. I've ground my bevels and drilled my holes. And I also fullered the handle. I always fuller the handles because it lightens the handle. I also taper my my spine, so it lightens the handle, as well as provides more surface area for the epoxy to grip onto the scales that I put on. But you'll notice that I sandblasted my blade. Now, that's not necessary. I like doing this because, just like when bluing a blade, when you have it sandblasted, it also creates more surface area for that chemical. And it gives it a much more even etch. And so I kind of took that premise and applied it to the clay. So there's more surface area for the clay to harden to and grip onto. So I've found, and this is just anecdotal, I have no data to support this, and I don't really know anyone else that does this, but I will sandblast my blade, and I believe that it helps the clay stay on the blade during heat treat. Now, a lot of that has to do also with if the clay has actually had time to harden and is fully dry before you stick it into your furnace for the heat treat. All right, so let's go throw on some clay, and we'll get ready for the heat treat, and I'll explain more as we clay the blade. All right, so I've used a number of different furnace cements. This particular one is Satanite. I've used Rutland's, and I've also used Hamon 1800. I really like Satanite. I feel that I get the strongest results with it. All right, yeah, also I apologize for my kids. You're gonna hear them in the background. They're having a bunch of fun right now, so they're being super loud, and all those parents out there, you know that it's hard to get any sort of privacy. So if you guys want to learn about hamons, you're gonna just have to deal with it. But when it comes to the consistency that you're looking for with your Satanite, you want to add just enough water so that it's like a soft serve ice cream, to the point where when you stick your stick or whatever it is that your applicator is into the Satanite, and you are getting ready to actually apply the clay, it looks as though it wants to fall off like your applicator, but it doesn't quite do it. You can see how the Satanite has kind of like a sharp edge that looks like that's the point at which it wants to fall. I kind of use that as a paintbrush to apply it. And I don't use any special applicator, especially if I'm doing something like a really simple hamon like we're going to do today. I'm not going to do anything complicated. So here I'm putting clay where the choil area is. This is a high stress point for the blade. Also, it's giving me a point at which to connect the clay that's going to be on the bevel itself. And what that allows me to do is, in the event that during the quench the blade warps, even if I miss the 30-second window directly after the quench when everything's still kind of hot to straighten the blade, the fact that I have a lot of soft steel or softer steel
near the spine of the blade will still allow me to lightly hammer the blade and straighten it out. Now this is something I almost never have to deal with because my normalization cycles are good, but every once in a while I still my blade will warp just a little bit somewhere, and I plan my clay out just for that eventuality, because it's the time that you don't plan the clay out and don't connect it to the choil area that will be an issue. Oh yeah, there's one other thing that I forgot to mention, and that is like I said, I sandblast the blade prior to putting any clay on it because I think it helps helps the clay hold on to the clay itself. But one of the other things that you really need to ensure that you do is ensure that you don't touch the blade. Any sort of natural oils, or just oil in general, or grease or anything like that, is going to impede the clay from sticking onto the blade. And if you're going for a specific pattern, that's obviously what you do not want. You'll still get a hamon if the clay comes off during the quench. It's just going to be different from what you had intended. Now with that, it's really important to know that the biggest challenge you're going to have with a hamon is the fact that it's most likely not going to follow your clay. Getting a good hamon is not hard. Getting a hamon to do what you wanted it to do is the hard part, and it's all about controlling inconsistencies. And there are seemingly countless amount of variables that you are trying to control for in order to get a hamon to do exactly what you want it to do. I'm not going to go over that in this video. That's not the purpose of this video. This video is simply to give you an idea of a method you can follow to get an interesting looking hamon. So don't focus too much on the fact that there are a ton of things that can change your hamon, and just be flexible when it comes to the final, I guess, shape of the hamon line. It may be exactly as you wanted it, may be completely different. And as I said, there's tons of things that cause this, and we're not really going to get into it in this video. All right, as I said, if the clay comes off during the quench, that's obviously going to have an effect on how the hamon comes out. So our goal is to not have the clay come off. So what we're going to do is, in order to ensure that, we're going to let it cure overnight. Now, letting it cure overnight isn't 100% necessary. It's all right to use a heat gun, but even with a heat gun and fully drying the clay, I've had the clay break off. So in order to get the most durable version of your clay, you should let it cure overnight. When it comes to the edge, that's about 1.5 millimeters worth of thickness. You can go down to 1 millimeter or even 0.5 millimeter for the quench and not have any issues. Just need to ensure that your blade was normalized properly. And so yeah, that's it for today. We'll go ahead and let it cure overnight, and then we will come back tomorrow and we'll actually do the quench.